Oh, there it is. Never mind.
So that's my biggest thing. So I have to, hey, I have to put that big red line in my sermon or my notes or whatever to like click my slide. Otherwise, I'll just like be behind.
See, that would be hard for me because the notes that I use are the notes that are on the PowerPoint. Like I don't use very many other notes.
I don't know that I use them. I just have them. I think it's just a comfort thing for me to have a transcript. I think it's part of my creation process is this transcript. And then I just haven't. But then I could easily, I don't know. I think there's a big difference too. I think there's like, I think it's the same thing as like practicing. Is there's a difference between like preaching one sermon and how you prep for that, opposed to like if you do it professionally or full time.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? Like you do it every Sunday, and so like you're prepared and you're ready, and you have like you already have like a knowledge or a comfort zone of how it's gonna look. You know, because for my Bible class, I don't transcript. I outline because I'm more comfortable. Oh, we're back to the pre-show questions.
It's a question I'm about to ask you.
Oh, I think people really want to
yeah.
know about how I prep for a class in. Just kidding. Probably not.
No, I think you're probably exactly right.
Old McDonald's Batman Riddler cup. Shout out to Grandma Ida.
Grandma Ida. We had a hurricane named Ida last year.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Nice.
So, if you could time travel, would you go back in time and meet your ancestors, or forward in time and meet your descendants?
Definitely ancestors. I think there's something that's and now what would you answer real quick before I continue my sentence?
I would like to go back in time, but I think if I could only choose one, I would go forward.
All right, then I'm gonna change my answer. Definitely back in time.
Okay, and now tell me why, because you were starting to tell me why.
I was gonna say, well, don't take it personal.
I won't take it personally.
I think there's something like egotistical about wanting to go and see like your descendants and be like,
100%.
hey, has my bloodline like done something amazing? Are they doing something great? And I would just rather like, that's cool, but that's the future, and I'm not gonna be there, so that doesn't matter to me. And I'd rather not know. Like if I'm dead, I'd rather not know. So it'd be better for me to like go back in time. Like I'd love to meet my grandpa's grandpas and stuff like that, or even go further. You know, wherever, how far back you go.
Yeah,
so,
I can do
like,
that
for
with
me. Like I think it's part of my personality of just like not caring. That like, hey, it's their decisions, it's their stuff, and whatever they do is what they do, and I hope they make the right decisions, but it's not on me.
My wife is trying to make me come across a little better here. She said, having a grandchild changes things. I want to go into the future for sure. No, but I agree with you, because it is, I want to know, have I laid the groundwork for people to do something and do something well? And if I go to the future and that's not the case, what do I need to do differently to make sure that they have it?
Yeah, sure.
No, so I don't take it personally, because that actually was my first thought. Was well, that's kind of arrogant, but at the same time, I can't change the past, but I can change the future. So,
yeah, and that's true. I mean, that's 100% true. So I get that. I think I'd like to go to the past just because I like to see what what small things affected my presence.
And I would say if
so that's just me.
Someone asked on the question on Facebook the other day, like if you had a picture of a bench and a lake, said if you could sit on this bench and have a conversation with anyone, who would it be?
Jesus.
And no, it wasn't for me. It was my grandparents that had passed. I would want to sit down and have one more conversation with my meemaw and my pop.
I can get behind that. I would love to
I
sit
would
down with my grandpa and grandpa.
I would want to whittle one more peach seed with my granddad, and listen to my grandma play the piano one more time. I was so young when my grandmother passed away, and once someone is gone, you realize, man, I didn't take advantage of those opportunities we had when we had them. So,
My grandfather passed away. Both my grandfathers passed away when I was pretty young, and I feel like that did affect me, and I felt like I did spend a lot of time with with one of my grandmothers after that, and and I do appreciate that time. And I think there's a lot of times where I wish like that Lauren could have met my other 3 grandparents as well.
oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of interesting.
Let me get this bumper in here so I have an edit point.
Do it.
Till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for a beard.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Behind the Beards, and on Behind the Beards, we pull the curtain back, take a look behind the scenes, and try to reveal what goes on in the hearts and minds of those who are called to lead your churches and your ministries. I'm Joshua Fowler, preaching minister in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And my microphone messing brother on the other side of the screen here, Aaron Partlow, a youth minister in Longview, Texas. Man, what's new in your world, brother?
Well, other than just tornado stuff from the last week, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. We got to go to a baseball game last night. One of our teens invited us, and so we went and watched some junior high baseball, and was pleasantly surprised that there were like 3 or 4 of our other teens who were on the team as well. And so it was a lot of fun to like watch them all play. And he's a lefty. Jackson, who invited us, he's a lefty, and he pitched. So it was a lot of fun to watch him as a lefty open pitch. And then we had another teen, Tate, who was playing first base, and man, made some like really smart plays. He stole home from third, and that was super smart. And then Connor, another teen of ours, was playing out in the outfield, and even I think he got a run in by a bunt. So it was just interesting. Like they just had some really smart plays that take some critical thinking. So now I'm going to challenge them harder in Bible class because I know they can critically think.
You have proven yourself.
You have proven that you can think harder about stuff. So that was a lot of fun. I always enjoy. That's part of my job that I enjoy so much is being invited. I make an effort, especially when you have a youth group that's so large. Like it's hard to go to everything. So you make an effort really that if we get invited, we will be there.
Right.
And so that's just one of my favorite parts of my jobs is being able to go to sporting events.
Well, we had one of those days yesterday that did not go according to plan, and it started Sunday night.
Uh-oh.
Heather was flying home from Oklahoma.
That's right, yeah.
Judging gymnastics. Her plane landed at 11:15 in New Orleans. It's about an hour and 10 minutes away from the house. So she gets her bag, she gets to the car, and the car won't start. And it's not a battery, so she can't just find somebody to get a jump. It cranks, it won't start. So at midnight on Sunday night, I got up, drove to the airport in New Orleans, picked her up, brought her home. We got home about 2:45 a.m. Got up the next morning, took Dylan to school so I could use his car.
Right.
Picked up some parts, drove back to New Orleans, fixed the car in the long-term parking garage.
Good for you.
Brought it back.
How did you bring it back? Did you get somebody else to drive it?
Heather drove it.
Oh, so you took Heather with you. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Heather.
I was like, how'd you drive 2 cars back?
Yeah, no. Heather went with me, and then she drove her car back home. And then ended up spending the afternoon working on the Jeep. So it was just one of those days of working on cars and stuff. But man,
Props to you, man.
the older I
get,
get,
do any of that.
the older I get, the less I function on 2.5 hours of sleep, though.
My car breaks down, I'm buying a new car. Like, I wish I could actually do that, but
YouTube is your friend. YouTube is your friend.
But you have to like know what's wrong with it first.
That's true. That is true. So yeah, but it was one of those days. But hey, today's a new day with new challenges, right? Good
True
stuff.
that.
Well, man, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about criticism. How do you take criticism? How do you give criticism? And
this is a hard topic. We should just address that. Like, this is not an easy topic, and I don't have all the answers either. And I don't know that I fully do this perfectly every time. So there's my disclaimer.
For sure. Well, and so this comes from me from two places. Number one, Ron had a really good question on our podcast last week, and he said, how do you give criticism when you're concerned that people may leave your group or leave your church? That sometimes that is one of those fears that we face. Yeah. And then we've been talking in our Bible class about, standing up and speaking things that are true, even knowing that it may cost you something, maybe something very valuable. And how do we have difficult conversations about things that are political, religious, moral, points of theology, points of doctrine, those points of differences that we have with people that are in our culture and in our lives.
Right.
And how do we have those conversations and speak to them what we know to be true, but do it in a way that doesn't just shove people out of our lives. So, yeah, I think this conversation is when we talk about how do we speak truthfully, but with love. It's one of those questions that we ask and we recognize that it's important, but I don't think we really talk about how we do that very often. And so it's about a lot more than just criticism. It's about having those difficult conversations that just have to be had. So, anything else we need to set the stage for as we kind of get into this conversation, besides the obvious disclaimer of I don't do this well, and I am speaking to myself as well as everybody else?
No, I think that's pretty good. I think that kind of sets the gun pretty set there and straight for the topic in which we're going to talk about for sure. I think there's a lot of unveiling when it comes from just the title, just in general, like in truth and love. It reminds me of, and this isn't fully in our notes, but maybe this is a little introduction. But there's like two phrases, one that I learned in the West Coast and one that I learned now that I live in Texas, closer to the South, that don't give you free reins to say whatever you want, right? Like, just because you say, hey, no offense, but it can still be offensive.
Is about to come out of your mouth.
Yes, and you probably need to rethink why and how and all that kind of stuff. And then also, oh, bless their heart, but, both phrases don't give you the freedom to say. And everyone probably in chat or everyone on the podcast is going, yeah, I've been the recipient of that, and I've also probably been the one who started a phrase or a conversation that way. That's not the way that you handle things. It's also, texting is so easy, right? 9 times out of 10, man, I would prefer you to text me and then call me, other than just call me, just in general. And I don't know why that is. It's a cultural thing, maybe. But there are some conversations that need to happen in person, and not on the phone or through a text message and something like that. So those would be
for sure.
Those would be my starting phrase, and I think we'll come back to those later on. But I think most importantly, there is a way that we should always start a hard conversation, and Josh is going to talk about that.
I know, because you always get to talk about prayer at least first, and
I know.
I'm going to do it this
time.
Out. These are going to be some practical things. When I was looking and kind of researching for what other people might be saying about how we do this,
right?
It was always hey, we should do this, and here's what Scripture says, and we should do this, and here's what Scripture says. But it's like, yeah, but But how do we put that into practice? Right?
Yes.
Because I want to be practical. I want to give somebody they can give them a framework that they can hang a conversation on. So, and we say this many times, and we can't say it enough. But it starts with prayer and it ends with prayer.
Yeah.
And I have like in my notes here, I have capitalized during, before, during, and after the conversation. You may be having a difficult conversation with someone that is not a Christian. It's okay for you to pray with a non-Christian before you have a difficult conversation. So I'll pray before I have that conversation. And then as I get ready to, when I'm sitting in front of that person, I'll say, hey, can we pray together? Would you allow me to pray for this conversation we're going to have before we really get into it? Because I think you can do a lot of ministry in praying with someone, right there in person. So I can ask the Holy Spirit to come and be a part of our conversation.
Totally.
To guide our thoughts and our minds, and to help this to be a place of openness where we can hear one another as well as be heard. And so before, during, and then closing that moment with prayer is just one of the most important things we can do.
Honestly, guys, there. I think a lot of times we just underestimate what prayer does for us. Right? I mean, one, prayer brings you into the presence of God. It also it kind of like sets your mind to being in a better place. Like when we stop and when we pray, at least for me, like selfish intentions tend to like slowly melt away. It's almost like this: I can't lie. I can lie to myself, and I can tell myself that, hey, these are true intentions. But when I start praying it, then I start going, well, and I start rethinking some of my things. And so, if you're like, honestly, I was gonna say, like, if you're not bathing things in prayer, then you're doing it wrong. But honestly, what I'm trying to say is that we need to be more prayerful people. And I think when we are more prayerful people and we spend more times in meditation and prayer, when we mimic what Jesus does and we escape to lonely places to pray with God, then we find ourselves in an elevated stance. Like we find ourselves in a place where maybe some more things slip off of our back, or maybe we see more important issues or things at hand that this is not really that big of a deal. Or maybe then we actually see the slice of humble pie that's in front of us and we go, well, maybe this is more of a me thing than it is a you thing. I know I just terrified you, Josh.
You did.
But I think I know that happens, because I know that happens for me, and I know that I'm not like extremely unique. I'm like a marble, okay? Just like everybody else. I may be a little different, but we're all marbles. And so,
that's right.
I think if you're having a critical conversation or you're having some sort of scenario like that, I think bathing in prayer before, I agree. Even if it's a non-Christian and you're talking to them, like, man, you're a Christian. It's okay for you to pray. Like, stop letting the world define what you can and can't do or what makes you comfortable. Yeah, the world's like, oh no, you shouldn't pray because you're a Christian, you don't want to offend somebody. Hey man, you're a Christian, and so you're gonna pray. And so if you're gonna pray, you're gonna pray. Don't allow the world to deem what's important or what you can and can't do or what's socially acceptable when it comes to like your prayer life. So
yeah, we've done that. We've done that enough. We have surrendered things to our culture too frequently that have, and we no longer use emblems, phrases, ideas, because the world has taken them and used them for something else. And instead of saying, no, that's not what the rainbow means. If you want to use it for that, that's fine, but you're not going to keep me from using an emblem that God gave us to be reminded of his promise.
Yeah, so I think, yeah. No,
and so and I'm not saying they can't use that, but we have just given ground in so many places that prayer has to be one of those places where we stand firm and say, you're just going to be here with me, but we're going to cover this in prayer because this is really important to me and I can't live without it. So that's
right. And honestly, at the end of the day, if they choose not to pray, like, then they're just listening to you talk to your God, to your Father.
Yeah.
So it's silly to not take that into account. And maybe you feel uncomfortable praying in front of other people, and I think that's something that you just need to do more and be more comfortable with, and learn to be more comfortable with. Because Paul says multiple times, pray without ceasing.
Yeah, that's right.
That it should be an active part of your life, and so that should do it too. I like this next note that we have to talk about here, but it's that idea of listening before you speak, and to check your motivation and your bias. And I think that is so huge. I often think of that scriptural principle all the time. Being slow to speak, and so that we listen and we truly listen. And I think a lot of times
Quick
in
to
youth
listen,
ministry,
slow to speak.
quick to listen and slow to speak. I think a lot of times in youth ministry, man, that's the phrase that I have to practice the most. It's easy for me to give advice to teenagers and try to fix their lives. But 9 times out of 10, what they really need is they just need someone to actively and engagingly listen to them.
Yeah, that's right.
In my context, like, teens come from a place where a lot of times, they get so frustrated. I've had multiple people hand me something fancy that says, oh, teens, you know everything now, so move out of the house while you still know everything, kind of an idea. And people chuckle and laugh about that. I remember I had a high school teacher who had a sign that said that, like, move out of the house now while you still know everything. And for me, that's a cultural cry for help. That's a cultural cry of, I have ideas, I have thoughts, and I don't have a place where there's a sounding board for people to listen to me.
Right.
You're disregarding everything I'm saying because of how young I am. Who didn't make mistakes when they were younger?
Mm-hmm.
Who didn't sing the song, I did it my way, every time you made any decision whatsoever. And a lot of times, like, teenagers in my context, like, they just need someone who's going to listen to them. Who's just going to listen to them. I might talk to them and give them some advice, like, towards the end when they're ready to receive and hear from me. But a lot of times they just need a safe place to be able to communicate and feel listened to. And so when I stop and I engage the conversation and I try to get them to do 90% of the talking just to be able to listen to them, I find myself in that moment checking myself, erasing what I was going to say, because now I've learned more about them and about what's going on, and at least their side of what's happening.
And I think here is where the temptation lies for many of us on multiple fronts. One of them is I've done the work of preparing what I want to say.
Yes.
And I have it in my mind, and I'm so eager to get it out that I haven't made the time to listen.
Well, just let me say this, and then you can tell me whatever.
The other part of it is we've turned listening into something offensive.
Yeah.
I am listening so that I can see where are the holes in your argument that I can attack.
Exactly.
Instead of listening to really understand the heart of this person that I'm talking to. Mm-hmm. And I think that comes into this checking ourselves for our motivation and our bias. Mm-hmm. Because if I really sit and listen, the way I respond instinctively in my heart and in my mind is going to reveal some things in me that I need to be aware of. Mm-hmm. Before I have the conversation, I really need to ask myself, why is this conversation so important for me to have?
Yeah.
And is it motivated by love? Is it motivated by a desire for someone to see what is true? Or is it motivated out of a desire for me to be right and to show them that they're wrong?
Right. Yeah.
And 2 of those are proper motivations. 1 of those is an improper motivation.
Yeah.
If I'm just trying to prove somebody wrong or prove myself right, that conversation is not going to go well. Mm-hmm. If it's motivated by my love for someone and my desire for them to know that which is true, then I come with a better posture of conversation.
Yeah.
And as I respond to some of the things they're saying, some of my own biases will be revealed to me if I'm honest enough with myself. Mm-hmm. And those are the places where I need to be very careful with my language and with my tone, because there's already something in me that is, bent against those things. So it just helps us communicate and communicate clearly and communicate effectively when we come with those things.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
The other thing is, I think we have to be. I see in our culture we have this idea that if you think something different than me, then you're against me. And I think that's one of those myths that we have to get out of our heads, that just because someone disagrees with you or thinks differently than you doesn't make them the opposition. That we have to stop seeing them as enemies or someone that needs to be like fought against or opposed. But to learn how to walk together even in disagreement. And that's I see that as an increasing challenge with the increasing number of places where people have to voice their opinion, their thought, and their words. Yeah, agree.
Yeah,
You're just listening. You're listening so well today, Aaron.
Thank you. I think there's so many of these things that we've been affected, and there's so many books that have been written. There's books that'll be written about like our cultural context in America today that kind of lead us through this. You know, we think about social media and how that's changed how we've had conversations with people in the past. You know, we think about, you know, how politics are being ran right now, and how, you know, it's very much like if you're not on my side, then you're against me. And so this world constantly is trying to teach us to put ourselves against us. Josh said something the last week. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or if it was just when we were at the bowling alley or what it was. I don't know. Josh says a lot of things. But he said a phrase, and I've actually used it in class this last Sunday when I thought about it. But, you know, he said, you know, if you're trying to take a stand and the whole world is cheering you on, you might think about what you're taking a stand for. You know, because we were talking about, like, you know, if we're going to be for Christ, then the world's going to hate us. We're going to be different. And so if we're taking a stand and the world's like, yeah, do it. And you're like, oh, wait, hold on. Like, why are you cheering for me? It's kind of this idea. And so, like, if the context and the way and the format in which we are deriving and having these conversations with other people is in such a way that, like, it aligns with the way that, you know, a worldly person or context might have a conversation, we need to really rethink about these kind of conversations and how we go about them. This all sounds like so intellectual and up here, but at the same time, like, just to bring it down, like, just to be real about it, man, Jesus teaches us how we are to go to people if we have a fault with somebody, right? He says, if you have a fault against somebody, go and talk with them, because if they listen to you, you have gained a brother.
Not just a friend.
Not just a friend.
A brother.
But you have gained a brother. And I think right there, Jesus really encompasses the spirit and the mindset. You're not going with your sword to hold it to their throat and to say, you're wrong. You're not going to beat down the door and give them a beat down. Hey, know your place. You're going because you're humble and you want to gain a brother. Like, the whole spirit behind that entire passage is about gaining a brother back and having this deeper connection and understanding and this deeper love for people in the world. That it's not about being right. It's not about getting vengeance. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about gaining a brother, and what that's like.
And even Ephesians 4, you know, is like, hey,
absolutely,
it's where the phrase comes from. We speak the truth in love, that we might encourage each other, you know, on to right behavior. So
yeah, the whole spirit behind that is encouraging people. And so I think a lot of times, like, we get into a hostile mindset, and I think that's the way the world is right now. Is that the world is a hostile place, just in general.
And I don't think that means that we're always looking for an argument, right?
Right.
When you say, you know, if you're doing something and the world is cheering you on, then you're probably doing the wrong thing or going the wrong direction. That can give the implication that, well, we're just always out looking for a fight. And it's like, no, but the truth is, the way of Christ is so rarely parallel to the way of the world. And so it doesn't mean that we're always looking for a fight, but what it does mean is that when we're living in the will of God, the world is going to look at us in a peculiar fashion and say, "Why in the world are you doing that?
And why'd you
Why
do
are
it
you
that
living
way?
that way?
Hmm.
What's the purpose behind this?" And and I think that's the thing that we really have to understand is we're going to find places where we disagree with people. I mean, that's okay. That doesn't make them the enemy. But what it does make them is people that we need to have conversations with,
Hmm.
and we need to be able to continue to have those. You
So
beat
when you
around the
take,
bush, or do you just blurt
well,
out the truth? What's your form?
well, my transition into that is this: when we do all of these things that we just talked about before, it boils it down to where we can kind of speak plainly, because we boil ourselves down to where we've set the groundwork for how we're approaching the conversation. We've set the groundwork in our character about the relationship that we have with that person. I think sometimes I don't know. Like sometimes I'll beat around the bush because it depends on body language. I'm a really big body language person. I enjoy studying body language. I enjoy reading people's body language. I do it during my sermons. Sometimes I'll switch gears on how I'm kind of presenting something based on people's body language. I don't know. Like it's just
If
something.
people are snoring, I raise my voice.
That's right. Actually, I do. I have done that where like I'll see kids nodding off in class, and then like I will talk louder or something. Like I'll make a point. Anyway, but this kind of sets that mood for how you can approach a critical conversation, or bringing up some sort of conversation like this. So I think a lot of times I speak plainly. I think in my head I want to be like, well, sometimes I beat around the bush, but the more I think about it, I think my teens and people would say, no, you're pretty just upfront, Aaron. Like you're pretty just upfront. And a lot of times my teenagers are like glad about that. They're like, man, you just don't beat around the bush. You'll just say it exactly how it is, and you'll just like come out and you'll just say it. And I think 7.3% of the time out of 10, my teens are thankful for that. I think sometimes that can get me into trouble, and I have to do some explaining.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So I think it's interesting with this newer generation of young people that are coming through. They're much more receptive to plain speech.
I agree.
I think you gain their respect when you just lay it on the line and then say, okay, now what points of this do we need to clarify? Who has questions? And they're much more willing to engage that.
That is 100% true. And that is the format now in which I teach a lot of my Bible classes that are topical. As I say, here's exactly what the Bible says. And now let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And every time I do that, I have 5 or 6. A lot of teams go, "Wow, that was a really good class, Aaron." And it's because they're seeking for that truth, that concrete kind of this is what the Bible says about I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I think the truth is that's what we're seeking, even as an older generation as well. But we haven't really been given that, not at least in a way that's receptive. And so it makes us really uncomfortable when some of those things happen. And we're just grown accustomed to people not talking about important things in important ways.
Right.
We don't call things, by their name all the time.
Yeah.
When it comes to sensitive topics, well, we want to kind of talk around the difficult passages, the difficult concepts, the difficult phrases. And we want to say what we're trying to say without actually saying words that people might find offensive. And when you're talking about difficult topics, when you're talking about parts of theology, when we're talking about political ideas that we might really disagree on, you have to speak plainly. And I can't assume that you know what I mean when I use certain phrases or certain words.
Right.
If you want to say it plainly, say it clearly, and then take the time to clarify any misunderstanding. Don't just pass it over, and don't get frustrated when someone doesn't understand what you mean. But take the time to have that conversation and finish it. And that open honest, plain, clear communication is so important. Because if we are using or assuming people understand something, then what you get is you get someone on the other end who doesn't receive what you're saying in a loving way, because they have assumed on the other side that you meant something that you didn't mean. And so clarity, openness, honesty, and continuing to pursue that clarity is the way we get to a place where, and I have to be okay with saying, man, I am really sorry I said that in a way that generated those emotions in you. That is not what I meant at all. Let me clarify that. And here's what I mean, and here's where I'm coming from as far as my heart goes, and here's what I'm trying to say. Does that make more sense? Is that more clear?
I think a lot of times would do more damage too when we don't just say, "Hey, this is what's bugging me," or "Hey, this is what's going on, and this is what we need to talk about." To be fair, I feel like I have built more relationships and closer relationship with some teens that after class that I've pulled aside and I said, "Hey, can we chat real quick? Hey, I'll let you know. Like, I feel really discouraged when you actively are not participating in class. You know, when I see you're on your phone, I see you're paying attention. Is there something going on? Is there something I can do better?" You know, and then they have like this clicking point where like, oh, you actually care? You actually realize, you know, what's going on? And then like my class next time, you know, they're more engaged in class, or at least they're paying attention or something like that. And so,
but the temptation in that instance is for the next class period is you stand up. This is the human temptation. So Sally Sue Smitherson was on her phone in class last week. And so at the beginning of class this week, I'm gonna get up there and say, "Hey guys, I just want all of you guys to know that, I mean, it's really distracting when you're surfing on your phone. So I need everybody to make sure that we're off of our phones." Well, 95% of your class that hasn't been on them is looking around and going, "What the heck's going on?"
right.
And that one person who you're actually talking to doesn't get the message. You know why? Because they're probably
phone.
on their phone and they're not paying attention, or they're assuming it's about someone else, because I really hide this well.
Yeah.
And
I'm
so
the pro.
that passive aggressive communication never lands where it's intended to land, and it always lands on people who it's not intended for. So instead of getting your point to the people who you're actually talking to, you end up offending and hurting other people who weren't even a part of the conversation to begin with.
And if anything, it creates more of a rift.
That's right.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
I mean, passive aggressive behavior, that's what it does. It's never passive or aggressive. It's always rift creating. I mean,
aggressive,
it is.
offensive.
It is. Passive aggressive behavior is probably the most toxic behavior that you can have, and it's something that we really need to like really get out of our mindset and our idea. So
It comes out of my sarcasm.
yeah.
I mean, my sarcastic comments. I have to be careful with those, and it's far more prevalent than it should be.
Yeah, you do.
I struggle with this last one, leaving a conversation open.
Yeah, I like to fix things. I'm a fixer.
Yeah, but it's okay, and we have to get to that place where we are okay with leaving a conversation unresolved.
And it's okay to have multiple conversations about it too.
Absolutely,
Because that's leaving it open, right? And putting it aside, and then going about whatever you need to do, and then having more conversation about it, and still being loving and supporting, and all that kind of stuff. I think that's probably the hardest part, is that you have to see the end game and the long run and the long game, and the relationship and the brother or the sister behind the conversation.
And then the temptation that we want to avoid with leaving a conversation open is having that be the only thing that drives our conversation. So if I think point A and you think point B on this topic, and we have this conversation once and we say, "You know what? You've given me a whole lot to think about." That's the way I like to leave that conversation, is I need to really take some of the things you said. I really want to go think about them. And so let's finish this conversation another time. And then the very next time I see them, the temptation for me, because I want resolution, is to get right back into that conversation.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe we need to talk about what happened last night in the basketball game, or what they went and did with their friends at school, or what their
How's work
family
going?
is doing. How's work going? You want to go grab a bite to eat and just talk about the parade that's coming up in the community, how we're going to be a part of that, um, and just continue to live life together, and not let this one point of disagreement become the thing that drives all of our conversation. Let's not forget that we had a relationship before we came into this situation, which is why we're here, and it's why I want to have it with you, because I love you, and if I have that feeling for you, then we've had something up until this point, and not allow this to consume this open-ended conversation to consume everything about who we are, but to continue to live life together. And when the opportunity presents itself to continue that conversation, do so. And you've already laid the groundwork for it.
Right.
Maybe one of the most healthy ways we can have these difficult conversations is over a long period of time.
Yeah, a lot of times that's what builds that rapport as well as you're doing that. So then that gets us back to the beginning of this episode, right? It brings us all the way back to the major point that we started this entire episode with, right, Josh?
That's right.
Are you ever afraid of somebody leaving your church, or what was it? Leaving your church? I feel like
Or your group.
or your group because of a critical conversation.
And yeah,
Yeah,
I am.
I think that's the answer. I mean, I think
It's what keeps me from having the conversation sometimes, is because
okay.
I don't want to
Interesting.
have them. I don't think people are going to leave, our church necessarily. But when I have people in my life, I just don't want to do or say anything that's going to make them choose someone else when they would have chosen to be around me.
Don't want to live my life. I'm sorry.
But to get out of that sphere of influence, and I'm often I lack the confidence in my own ability to have that conversation in a loving way. I don't want to say something stupid that's going to hurt or offend or push them away. And so what I'll do is we'll just kind of choose to, maybe next time, maybe next time, maybe next time. And then we're 3 years down the road, and we should have had this conversation a long time ago.
Yeah, for me, that's what drives the aspect of chasing after people. I've been in places where I've been in places personally where I've said a sarcastic comment and it's hurt somebody's feelings, and so instead of like, that's a conversation that we're gonna have is we're gonna have to address that, and so instead of just putting it off and letting it fester or letting it dissipate, everything that we just talked about drives me to go and fall on my sword and have a conversation with them and apologize about that, because I want them to be engaged. I want them to be here. And so if I have a critical conversation with somebody and they take it offensively or they take it the wrong way, man, you better believe that I'm going to, 1, be praying for them, and then 2, praying for myself, and then 3, praying that God helps me in this conversation that we're continually have. Because if they took it in a negative way, then I consider that still an open conversation, and that's what causes me to, in a respectful way, because sometimes time is and space is needed, but to chase after or reach after and remind them that, like, even though I said something critical, I am genuine in the fact that I do care about you, and I do love
absolutely.
you, and that I want to be there for you, and and I'm interested in your life and all that kind of stuff. So that's how I would answer that question. Like, yes, I am worried if I say something critical, but at the same time, I might have to say something critical because it's what Jesus would say or Jesus would want for them. But then also at the same time, but I'm also going to search after. I'm also going to leave the 99 for the 1, and all those kind of things. And so I think when we encompass all of those principles, we start putting our faith and our trust in God and Jesus instead of
and I agree. Like, for
else.
me, I'm quick to go and fix something that I've messed up, and most of the time, as soon as I say it, I know I've messed it up. Right?
Yeah.
And so I am quick to own those things. I am less quick to initiate the conversation because I know it's going to be hard, and I know that people taking their ball and going home is always a risk.
Yeah.
And that's just
That's
a
a
fear
good
we have to
phrase.
get over. Yeah, that's just a phrase we have to get over, a fear we have to get over, because the
Yeah.
truth is more important, and our love for those people is more important than what they're going to do with it.
All right. Behind the beards moment.
Dang it.
I've got it. I've got one. I think a lot of times, for me, a behind the beards moment for y'all is that we have to have these. I have to have these conversations a lot, almost weekly. And if I think about the amount of stress that this causes me, to like know that I have to have some of these hard conversations. Like, yes, I'm in prayer, and yes, I'm giving them to God, but it still takes like a big toll and a lot of stress on myself. And I think that's just one of those things that, you know, when a minister, when we talk about like, hey, you have to be respectful of like taking a vacation, taking a day off. Like some of these things are some of the things that like you're really taking a vacation from, taking a day off from, taking a sabbatical, you know, from, and things like that is so that you can, you know, take care of yourself, you know, mentally and physically and some stuff like that. And these are some of those things that pour in to for your ministry and your ministry leaders. You know, if your shepherds look beat down and hard, and worn down, it's probably because they've spent a lot of time being on the critical end of shepherding instead of being able to be in the good end of shepherding. You know, celebrating your child's life, and being in healthy Christian families, and scenarios, stuff like that. Like shepherds usually don't get to be a part of that because they're usually, you know, the big bad bosses, you know, kind of an idea, you know. And so shepherds are people too. Elders are people too. And they need encouragement, and they need to see the bright end of the tunnel, because they can bitter and sour, just like anybody else. And same with deacons. You know, if the only time that you're ever having a conversation with a deacon is because you have a problem in that ministry, it's really rough. One of the things, and I have them here, like I have one right here, and I've never been in a place that has been so faithful about this. But I receive like these thank you cards, or these, hey, you're doing a really good job notes. And I think that's something that other churches and other congregational members need to remember and think about doing, because they really, really encourage me, and they give me, at the same time when I say that, it's like, well, I do it for Jesus. I don't need the encouragement. But at the same time, like, man, it's nice to get encouragement. It's nice to know,
absolutely.
that I'm doing good things. And so I challenge you to do that for your elders. Hey, I see you all praying and thinking, and serving this congregation, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
know, and not just your preachers, not just your youth ministers, especially your youth ministers, but not just
remember
them.
those people that do that work behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
that work that really makes the church function and function well.
That's right.
Remember
And I
that.
hope that this episode and stuff like this helps reveal, you know, some of those things. That's why, like, a lot of people say ministry is not for everybody, because these can build up, and these can, this is the weight of these conversations, and the weight of how often you get and you have these conversations, they can crush you.
Yeah,
They can crush
good
you.
stuff, man. Well, hey, I'm looking forward to next week. Next week, we're going to have Josh Kincaid here with us. We're going to talk about what goes into actually writing a curriculum, and putting things together. How do we determine what it is that we're supposed to be teaching and preaching? And Josh is a minister at Memorial Road Church of Christ in Edmond, Oklahoma. And if you ever want some good class materials, this man writes really solid adult Bible class curriculum. So
He does. Great guy.
we're looking forward to that. And, you know, shameless plug here, since you're listening to us, find us on your regular podcast channels, and like and share the podcast. Let us know. Send us an email. We want to know what it is, what questions you might have, topics that you might want us to address.
That's right.
We're always open to that, open to suggestions.
It makes a big difference when you like and share us on Facebook too. It really does. It allows our podcast to get out there and more people to be able to see it, and stuff like that. So if you hit that share button, that's a huge deal to us, and we appreciate it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we want to thank you all for being here today. We appreciate it and we love you. We want to remind you of Galatians 6:9. We do this every week on the podcast. We want to remind you of Galatians 6:9. Do not grow weary in doing good. This world is messy. This life is messy. So allow Christ to use you to do something different, something good in Jesus' name, right? And don't grow weary in doing that. I'm Aaron, and this is Josh, and we will see you next week on Behind the Beards.
Till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for a beard.
2, 1.
We need a director. We or what do they call that? Somebody that sits in the room and moves things around and puts things in place so we can just talk. They're always like, oh, and behind the glass, don't forget our so-and-so. I don't know.
We're not big enough. I don't think we're big enough. Right? I don't know.
Yeah. That was good, man. I enjoyed that conversation.
I enjoyed that podcast too. I thought that was super good. I thought we had a good rhythm, a good flow.
We're having some of those talks with some of our young adults, young families. With this kind of stuff that's going around, and it's like how we. In fact, I just had one of my girls text me, and she's like, "So I'm not going to be there on Sunday, and I know you don't usually do notes, but could you take notes for your Sunday class and send them to me because I really want to hear what comes next."
Right.
And we're talking about this kind of stuff on this next Sunday is the practical ways in which we have those difficult conversations. So. That was pretty
glad
encouraging.
we can just feed into your Bible class.
I am too.
We are talking about greed on Wednesday night, so I always find no matter where I go, teens really enjoy. They've enjoyed like this 7 Deadly Sins Bible class that I've done, where I just talk about like the 7 Deadly Sins.
Why do you think that is? Is it because we don't talk about it very often?
I think it's because it's like a catchy phrase. And then I think it's also because maybe we don't talk about it in that sense very often. I think they learn a little bit more about like what wrath is, about what gluttony is, what greed, I think they've just, you can see it seep in and how they're kind of behind the scenes kind of things. I don't know if it's because of the format. Like my format is I use Prezi, and then I describe and I talk about what it is, and then I give them some scriptures that really talk about it with 5 or 6 questions that they go to a small group. They break out and talk about it. Then they come back and we talk about it. And then I give them practical application about it. And then they go home. And that's the format of that class. I don't choose their small groups. I just tell them to go. And so you get natural groups and natural leaders. And for the most part, even the groups that like I worry about, even if they don't get all the way through it, like they do a good job at least reading the scriptures and talking about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's gone over well the 3 times that I've now taught it. So I'm excited about Josh Kincaid next week, and then the week after that, I'll make sure I'll talk with Jody about getting him in on the 5th or whatever.
That'd be the 12th.
The 12th. So yeah, the 12th.
Yeah.
To do a bit of
April's already here.
Pre-sabbatical stuff. Oh, I know, right?
The 12th we're going to be in Universal.
Okay.
So maybe that'd be one that you and Jody just do together if he decides to do it that week.
Yeah, or I might message Adam England and see if that's the one he'd want to do and push Jody off another week. Probably closer to a sabbatical, the better, but not into June, because June, I don't know what we're going to do in June.
We may have to take summer off.
I'll take a month off because by June, I just don't think I'm going to be able to podcast in June at all. Or you're going to have to just...
I'll be at camp for 2 weeks in July.
Yeah, maybe we just take June, July off.
Yeah, we shall see.
That will be sad. Yeah, because
we need a break.
See, June 31st, I could. The 7th, I couldn't. I could while I'm at Soul Quest. Probably not, actually, because
Probably not.
teach
There
classes
is
during
no.
that time.
Well, there's also no Wi-Fi service at
That's
New
right.
York,
And
no
then the
cell signal.
21st, I'm at Netsis camp. So then that's 3 weeks in a row. So then the 28th, yeah.
So disappointed. I'm going to miss Silkwest this year. We're going to be in a good place, though.
I'm not happy with you about not being at Silkwest.
It's a really important
It is.
request.
I understand, but it still doesn't change my feelings.
Mine either.
Being upset.
Mine either.
So don't worry. All right.
All right.
We'll just end this live.